Okay, hi.
Ram, I
Good.
think my talk is accessibility testing. I think the title is wrong. Just check.
Okay, I'll double check that. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So, I'm your host today. So, today will be our MOTCAL meetup number 14. Okay. So, today's agenda will be welcoming Ministry of Testing Kuala Lumpur, and then we'll have a talk on fundamentals of accessibility testing, followed by 99 seconds talk or Q&A, and then we will wrap it up. Okay. So today's session is sponsored by Ministry of Testing. So those who are not sure what Ministry of Testing is, Ministry of Testing is the biggest and most supportive global software testing community of practice. Okay. So there are four different ways which we connect to Ministry of Testing. Number one, we can learn on the dojo. They have the talks and articles which you guys can follow. Second way is to connect with the community. There's like active MOT Slacks and then the club and so on, which you guys can join. And third way is to attend the events. The famous one is the Test Bash. And finally, you can also contribute to the Ministry of Testing through writing articles and speaking in events and so on. So do check out their page. Okay. Next, we will be following these community principles all the time. So number one is to be human, be kind, be respectful, be supportive and inclusive, and also be open-minded. Okay. All right. Sorry. Just give me a moment, yeah. There's something else. Okay, so I'm sorry, there was like something wrong with the slide. So today's the topic will be on accessibility testing by Mahathee. So let me give a small introduction about her talk. So this session, Mahathee is going to cover overview of accessibility testing in software design. She believes in building product or developing solutions, keeping in view people from all sections of the society, and therefore it's a strong accessibility advocate. In years to come, she believes accessibility is going to be the new cool. All right. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Mahathee to the stage to give a talk. Mahathee, the stage is yours.
Yeah. So, hello everybody. I hope everybody is having a great time. So, today my talk would be about the fundamentals of accessibility and all that you need to get started. So, I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see it. So, are you able to see it?
Yes, Mahathee, we can see.
Yeah, so accessible much. So why did I use these exclamations? Basically, why am I even asking this question? So a lot of clients today or organizations or firms are focusing on accessibility. What do you think could be the reasons for this? And as a QA, why should we focus on accessibility testing as such? And what is the pivotal experience that you would like to provide to your clients or to your customers? And so for the so I would say before rolling out a feature or a product or a solution, we should keep in mind whether our application is accessible much. That is, it is accessible to all sections of the society, be it a normal user or disabled user or somebody with partial disability or anybody, and basically it should cater to everybody. So that being said, I'm Mahathee. I work as a senior QA lead with Persistent Systems at Hyderabad, and I'm a self-taught accessibility expert. The reason I came into accessibility was pretty much that I wanted to do something that connected with people. I felt automation and API were things that have been looked by everybody, and this area seemed much interesting to me. As if you want to talk about accessibility and do work pertaining to accessibility, you should have empathy towards people, and that is the first reason for my work. So, without further wastage of time, I would be starting it off. So, what is accessibility? If you go by the dictionary definition of it, something that could be easily obtained or reached. So basically, something that is very easy to understand. And suppose if you had planned a trip with your friend, and Google Map makes your location not reachable, the entire experience would be very frustrating and difficult. So when you are developing a product or a solution also, if your product is not accessible to everybody, the same experience would pass on. So that is one of the reasons why accessibility should be taken as an important requirement. And now accessibility is also called as ally, because you could notice there are 11 letters between A and Y, and terms of these type are usually called as numeronyms. That means a number followed by a letter followed by a number. If you could take examples of observability, Ollie, or canine as such. So this is a favorite quote which I always advocate to people. This is by Tim Berners-Lee. It says, "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." If you could notice these images, the normal person or the normal user would be easily going through both the paths. But whereas for a disabled person, one of these paths would not be accessible. It would make his experience very difficult, and he would have to rely on somebody to make him to travel through these paths. So whenever we develop a solution, or when we develop a design, we should keep in mind that not only a normal person would use, person who is blind, a person who's deaf, a person who's dumb, or a person with motor disabilities, anybody could be using it. So this is the curb effect. Curb effect is basically that it's used as a sign for accessibility, and basically it says that accessibility is not only for the disabled section of the society, it's for everybody. And this image basically talks about that. This image has been taken from the Applet Tools blog, and this image basically shows three important aspects that we are going to discuss. The first one is inequality, the second one is equality, and the third one is inclusion or accessibility. If you see the first image, although there are boxes here, the shortest person would not be able to see the match. Similarly, in the second case, you could notice that the short, irrespective of the height of the person, every person is able to watch the match. Whereas in the third case, you would notice that through the nets, this match is accessible to everybody, and you don't need any additional support like boxes or anything. In the first case, the tallest person actually doesn't need a box, and this seems quite irrelevant to me. Next, accessibility and inclusive design run together. So this is a picture that I've taken from the Microsoft's inclusive design blog. Basically, this covers four sections of disabilities: the touching, seeing, hearing, and speaking part. And then what is digital accessibility? So combining the accessibility and the digital part of it together, basically making digital products, which include websites, mobile apps, and digital tools or technologies accessible to everyone, and also maintaining the consistency, that is not only accessible at one part of the day or one part of the night, accessing the making the site accessible to everybody, and regardless of the impairments they have. And by whom should this site or should this application or your product be accessible? Basically, it should be accessible for everyone. But I've considered three examples here. Suppose you say there are students in Nigeria where the literacy rate is low, and it should be accessible for them. And if a blind user from California wants to access some application, it should be accessible to him. And I've taken an example of a senior citizen in India. Usually, senior citizens face problem with applications when they use applications like Google Pay or any wallet-based applications. They face a lot of issues. So these are the sections I've considered. And next, this is the word cloud for the web accessibility initiative. And these are some of the terms that you could associate when you think about accessibility. Screen reader being the most important one. And usability is one of the things that is taken into consideration. Assistive technology, color contrast analyzer, and some of the other terms that you could also notice. And some of the terminologies that you could get you could familiarize yourself with would be Wave, Ali, WCAG, web accessibility, or ARIA. And what are the disabilities that would be covered under this accessibility requirement? So basically, there are four set of characteristics. The first one would be the visual part of it. This would be focusing on the eyes. Basically, this covers people with low vision or blindness, totally blind or color blind. And the second part would be auditory, hearing pertaining to hearing, deafness, total deafness, or people who cannot hear a particular sound. And the third one would be motor, related to your hands or legs, and that would cover arthritis, stress injuries, amputation. And cognitive would be basically dealing with certain learning or neurological disabilities. And it would cover multiple sclerosis, ADHD, dyslexia, and these are some of the disabilities that it would be basically covering. And why do we need accessibility in the first place? First thing that I would say is empathy. If we see, over 1 billion people in the world have disabilities, and this contributes to around 15 to 20% of the entire population. The second reason is that the UN says that it's a mandatory right. And the third reason is the laws for accessibility are very severe. If you violate or if you don't abide by the law, your company would face a huge penalty. So these are some of the reasons. And apart from this, community, you can build a relationship with the community, because community it does not comprise only of people who are normally able. They are disabled, they are people with different kinds of impairments. So second thing would, business wise, your product would be a smart product, and it would foster innovation, and then it helps you to enhance your brand, and we can extend our market research and minimize the legal risks associated with it. Also, some of the goals related to accessibility, as I already talked about, it would reach a wider section of the audience and increase the usability, and it would satisfy legal requirements and improve the maintainability aspect. And if you see, it's a human right as well. If you notice in this picture, we see Stephen Hawking. For Stephen Hawking, disability was not an obstacle to his success. He had motor neuron disease for most of his life, and it did not prevent him from doing any activities. But for most of the people, disabled people, at least this is not the case. So that's why it's a human right, and it's important to have accessibility as a part of your requirements. And then reaching a wider audience. In the US, we have 61 million people who have some or the other kinds of disabilities. And similarly, in Europe, we would be considering 135 million people. And then the third thing is it's a civil right. If you see, I've considered some examples of companies like Target. Target had to pay a fine of $6 million because they had received a complaint from National Federation for the Blind that their site was basically not accessible to the blind or visually impaired users, and purchases could not be completed. So the second company that had faced a huge penalty was Netflix. Netflix also was sued by NAD, which is the National Association for Deaf, and they had to pay $755,000. And this also damages the company reputation. So the third and the most recent case and the famous one is Domino's. So there was a blind person named Guillermo Robles. He tried to order pizza through the website and mobile app, and he could not do it despite having a screen reading software. And according to the California's Unruh Act, the company had to pay $4,000 as a penalty. And if I have already spoken about laws, the laws for accessibility are very strict, and anybody who does not abide by it have to face severe penalties. So in US, the most famous law would be ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And then we have the US 508 Amendment and Section 504, which says that, which requires all the federal agencies and electronic information technology to be accessible to people with disabilities. And similarly, in India, we have Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, and UK, Australia, and Canada also have similar acts in place. So why do we need digital standard to assess accessibility? Accessibility is something I would say is very subjective. Something that is accessible to you might not be accessible to somebody else. So we require a global standard that would assess accessibility, and that standard would be nothing but WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are a series of guidelines that have been published by the WAI, which is Web Accessibility Initiative of the Worldwide Web Consortium. And then we have the different WCAG guideline levels. The The first one being 1.0, 2.0, and Section 508 and American with Disability Act. So basically, these have a set of guidelines and they have a checkpoints at different levels: level A, level AA, and AAA. Then this is about the World Wide Web Consortium. If you are a web developer, you would know what is W3C. They have standards for web, HTML, and CSS. And then there's the Y initiative, the Web Accessibility Initiative, that supports materials to understand and how do you want to implement accessibility if you're a newbie or if you're a beginner. So as I said, we have WCAG 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. The first law came around in 2008, and the most recent one being in 2021, which is the WCAG 2.2. So this is a company called Intopia. They have released a map for accessibility guidelines. So this is basically based on four principles, and these are called as the PORE principles, if you see. So PORE stands for P as in perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And then the levels that these guidelines have to be adhering to is level A, which is the minimal compliance level. And this should be at least met by most of the companies. And the acceptable level would be level AA. So this is the recent standard that the accessibility guidelines initiative has prescribed that every company should meet. And level AAA being the optional compliance level. Not every company meets this level, but it is good to have this as a part of your adherence levels. So this is an image by WebAIM. WebAIM is a company that basically conducts accessibility audits on 1 million sites every year, and they have pointed some common failure types when it comes to accessibility. So one of the most common issues that you can see that attributes to at least 85% of the issues are low contrast level, and second one is missing alt text, and followed by empty links, missing form input labels, empty buttons, and the document language. So the next one is assistive technology. Why do we need assistive technology in the first place? Because our audience would be mostly disabled users, and they are not users who could normally use things in a normal way. So we would be requiring something that would aid them or ease in the process of use. So some of the things that would be coming under assistive technology is screen readers, screen magnification software, and the alternative input devices. So coming to the Chromebox demo, Chromebox is a screen reader basically, and it will be helping the disabled user. So I will be showing the demo with this Chromebox user. One second. So this is the extension that you need to add to your browser.
Spoken feedback is ready. New tab. Beyond completion. Beyond completion. Ministry of Health and Family.
So I have
Privacy error.
So basically, I have taken. I want to search for Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So this screen reader will be basically telling me what is the kind of element. So
Privacy error.
So basically, it tells what is the kind of element and how should I click it, or how can I use it, and whether it's a text box. It calls it out for me. So that's what I basically wanted to show you as a part of the Chromebox demo. So the next part would be the role of an accessibility API in assistive technology. So what is the role of an accessibility API? So accessibility API is basically an intermediary, and this reads the information from the browser and it translates to your screen reader. And this screen reader would basically be giving the information to the disabled user, and he would be able to perform all his actions with a lot of ease. So what is an accessibility API? It basically communicates information about the user interfaces to the assistive technologies like screen readers, and it stores information about different elements. One could be your descriptive properties, which would be the name, role, or value, and the transient states. That is, suppose if you press a button or click any control, what are the states, whether it's pressed or whether it's focused or something like that, and what are the events that would be triggered, the text changed or whether the button was clicked, and what are the actions possible the possible user could be taking. It could be a clicking action or a dragging action, and what are the relationships in the DOM tree and the textual content. So another thing that I would like to tell here is ARIA is the Accessible Rich Internet Application Initiative. It basically enhances your semantic meaning of elements. It gives a good look and feel to your page, and it only exposes it adds extra information to the accessibility API, and it does not have any effect on the page HTML DOM as such. So if you have seen, I have shown you what some of the common reasons for accessibility issues. So one of these issues would be the low contrast issues. So I have covered one such example here. If you look at this picture, the left part of the image is very gray and light in color. So for a person with disability, this image would not be accessible, and it would be very difficult for him to probably get a hang of what this image is all about. And the right one is at least little better, where the gray is a bit darker and it's legible. So what is the success criteria? So according to level AA, the minimum contrast level that should be maintained is 1.1.4.3, and this is for text and images, and the remaining ones would be 4.5 4 is to 5 is to 1. And if you have large text that you are using as a part of your images, the contrast ratio should be 3 is to 1. And for incidental images or logotypes, there's no such contrast level that's specified. So the next thing is accessibility and SDLC cycle. So how does accessibility fit in? So when you start building a product, so right from the inception, where your UX or your UI team pitches in and they create a wireframe and a product backlog is created, and then the sprint backlog is done, accessibility falls into place in every cycle, if you notice. And till the time a product development has started to the time it has been shipped out. The next thing is, what can accessibility do if it's added as a part of your quality requirement? Basically, it enhances the quality and it adds trust, and the customer experience would definitely be improved, and it would make it law abiding. So what happens and how do we tackle this when a story comes for a QA cycle? So basically, when a user story comes as a part of a QA cycle, so the first thing we would be doing is we would be doing a certain set of exploratory tests, and then we would be doing our automation tests if required. And when it comes to accessibility, we should be doing both the manual accessibility checks and automated accessibility checks, because automated accessibility would be just covering 20 to 40% of the issues. And if you see, Mac has a voiceover control which will be aiding the accessibility checks. And for Windows, we have NVDA or JAWS. These are basically screen readers. And similarly for IE, we have JAWS again. And for the Firefox part, we have NVDA. So what are the different tools for accessibility testing that we could use? So these basically fall under three categories. The first one is something that requires human assistance. This is very simple, and a disabled user would not be able to use a mouse or some other kind of technology. So for him, the most easiest control would be keyboard. So this would fall under tools that require human assistance. Keyboard, or a combination of Control plus L on your keyboard, and the tab key or the arrow keys or your space bar, or as I said, the screen readers like NVDA and JAWS. So these are some of the things that I've mentioned. And this is voiceover for Mac, NVDA and JAWS screen readers for Windows. So the next set of tools would be semi-automated. So under these, I would be covering Axe, Wave, and Google Lighthouse. And then we have the automated part where we would be using the Axe Core library. It has various flavors. So the most common thing would be Axe CLI. This is the command line interface, and Jest for the JavaScript part of it, and Cypress Axe for Cypress, and then Selenium, WebDriver IO, and Test Cafe. So now today I would be covering only a bit about web accessibility. So because mostly we work on website based applications, so some of the issues that you could be considering as a part of web accessibility would be images without alt text, or missing or misplaced duplicate heading elements, alternate text that could be null, empty, or non readable, or links with no link text, or link text that is out of context. And the most common one that I have to already mention, the low contrast issues. And since they are disabled users, keyboard is an integral part of their life, so tabbing, navigation, or theming issues. Sometimes what happens is that when you use a screen reader, most of the times the screen reader is not in sync with your keyboard, and you would be facing certain amount of tabbing or navigation issues. And then font size, if you would be seeing, some sites have very poorly designed font sizes. And the last one would be visually distracting content or colors, and you could have bright orange or bright blue, and for a disabled user, having this bright usage of colors would make his experience very difficult. Then this is some trivia related to accessibility. It says that web content accessibility turns 10, but less than 10% of the sites are still accessible, and the internet is still unavailable to blind users. And most of the disabled people don't use online shopping sites because it's inaccessible. So accessibility should be taken as a serious concern. And so, like I say, we still don't talk about accessibility a lot despite having all these issues in place. And what are the benefits? Why should we consider web accessibility? Basically, because if your site is accessible, it is easy to use, as simple as that. And then it increases your user satisfaction. Your customer would be happy, you would be happy. Then it leads to a higher SEO ranking. SEO is if you're searching for your site or product. If your site is accessible, or if your product is accessible, your SEO ranking would be increased. And the laws or rules for accessibility have severe fines, so it will avoid legal complications. And if you adhere to accessibility, your company branding obviously will be boosted, and it encourages independence among the different set of users. So what are the common alley bugs you could be looking at as a QA? So zoom 200%. So this is like, if I'm zooming a particular page, the alignment changing? Am I seeing it in the same way as I used to see it earlier? Then use of ARIA. ARIA is basically, it tells you that you have suppose I'm clicking this quick styles. Suppose it tells me that this is a quick style button, and this is a button whether I have pressed it or whether I have just hovered over it. So descriptive links, for example, if I click a view details link, that link has to have some kind of a description. And then the keyboard navigation part, and crappy captions, color contrast, and these are some of the issues that you could look for as alley bugs. And then coming to the bug advocacy part of it, when we deal with bug advocacy, what are the things that we would be considering? First, the type of accessibility, what is the impact, the tool used, what is the alternative, and what standard does it follow, and the expected behavior that it has to show. So these are some real world examples where I would be showing some companies who are severely practicing accessibility. And this is my favorite company, McDonald's. And they have created a packaging solution called as Eat Call. And this especially assists the disabled users. So they don't have to basically use their hands while holding the package. They just have to place their mouth near the brim of the cover, and they're good to eat. And the next thing is, this is the athletic brand Nike, and he's a Mike, a patient who suffers from cerebral palsy. So what happens when you have cerebral palsy? There is no synchronization between the movements of your hands, and basically every day he has been facing a problem. When he used to tie his shoelaces, he had to depend on his parents or family members, and this was becoming a problem for him. And he addressed this concern to the athletic brand, and they have designed the shoe now, if you see, in such a way that if he places his leg in the rear part of the shoe, this the back portion expands, and he just has to put a sticker, and this makes the experience very easy. So some of the misconceptions pertaining to accessibility. So designing for accessibility is time consuming and expensive, but this is not the case. Like I said, from the design of your product, from the inception, if you embed accessibility as a requirement, it would not be time consuming or accessibility, and in turn it would be adding to your revenue. So basically more users, and more users equal to more money. And then accessibility testing is only the responsibility of the testers? No, as quality is the responsibility of the team. Similarly, accessibility testing is also the responsibility of everybody in the team. And we basically don't need any specialists or or experts who would be in this field. We just require a basic knowledge of accessibility, and we are good to go. And the third one is automated accessibility testing is enough. Like I highlighted earlier, manual plus an automated accessibility testing check would give a good result, because automated accessibility tests only cover 20 to 40% of the issues. And accessibility testing is hard? No, it isn't. There are a lot of resources. If I can learn, I'm a self-taught accessibility expert, anybody could learn. There are great resources which I've suggested at the end of this talk. And this is a Heroku app. This basically has an accessibility exercise. You could look at it in your free time, and this basically tells you how a disabled user would perceive this kind of an application. And then being compliant to web content accessibility guidelines does not mean your website is accessible. There are still different users that use products in a different way. So that is what I basically tell. And how can you start? So you can start as early as possible, and you can get involved with your UX team and also talk to people with disabilities. How are they using the website, or how they are using their product? What are the kinds of functionalities they would like to have in your product? You could have a discussion, and it's not your responsibility alone, and it's your team's responsibility. And integrate automated tools also earlier in the cycle. And start now, like I always say, and better late than never. Talk to everybody in your team and use keyboard often. Reduce your dependency on mouse is basically what I say. And if you're a beginner, and if you don't know what are the kinds of accessibility issues that you have to look through, you could download a checklist from the internet, and you could make use of it and make use of the different accessibility tools. And I know it does take time. Anything new, humans usually resist change or oppose change. So it will take time, and that is totally okay. You can't solve all issues, but at least you could solve that one issue and make the experience better for at least one section of users, and we could make a world a better place to live in. Then, now, how did I bring accessibility into my team? It wasn't easy, but I used this as one of the ways. The first thing is I brought about an awareness. The first thing when you look into when you bring any new thing into your team would be developing an awareness about it. And I started chatting about accessibility. Basically, I started making my team members familiarize with these terms, and then I created such informative content which will make them help understand what is accessibility, why should it be looked at, or how can we fit it into our QA cycle. So then I also worked on my communication, because if being the accessibility advocate, if I'm not clear on what I want to convey, I could not effectively express it to my teammates. So I also spoke to different teams, not only my team that I was working for, so that we could embed this as a part of our project. And also, I did a considerable amount of research on this, and I prepared a report as to what all I did and what did I cover and what did I not cover. And how can we coach somebody? So basically, you can become an SME or an advocate for ally, and you can express all the important details pertaining to accessibility, and you can take some inputs from your research or report and make sure they understand. And if they are not understanding this, why are they not understanding it, and why are they not serious about accessibility? So that being said, these are some of the resources that I had referred when I was learning accessibility, and some additional resources as well. The first resource, Inclusive Design for a Digital World, is a great book. I recommend everybody to read this, because it says that it takes a whole village to build an accessible product. And the TAU course, Test Automation University course by Mary Drake, has been a great source of information for me, very nicely explained. And this is with Cypress as a tool. So you could also use Selenium as one of your options. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying that all the disabilities that exist are created by people and not by the disability. So this is what Jerry Weinberg says. All problems are people problems, and all the best.
Windows screen reader graphic. Arabic tab.
Thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful topic, Mahadi.
Thank you,
Uh,
Ram.
Frankly, this is also my first time attending a talk regarding this topic.
Yes,
In fact, I myself don't have much awareness or in-depth understanding of accessibility testing.
yes.
So, guys, if you guys have any questions, you guys can start putting it in the chat. I'll pick it up from there. Okay. So, meanwhile, I myself have one question. So
Okay.
I totally like and support that companies should be inclusive to all groups of people, right? Not just certain
Yes,
groups of people. And
yes.
often they forgot that disabled people are also people, right? So,
Yes.
in your opinion, right, how are companies perceiving accessibility testing? Do they understand the importance of this? Do they understand the value it gives? What do you think?
Uh, I would say at least in the last year to this year, I would say there's been a significant growth. So if you see most of the fan companies like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, or Netflix or Google, they have their own accessibility divisions, and they have been taking this very seriously. But a change has been brought about at least in the recent. In Hyderabad, we have a firm called as DQ. This firm focuses only on accessibility. Can you believe a firm that is wholly and solely focusing on accessibility? And they have a huge demand for accessibility testers. It's not that people say usually automation will kill jobs of humans. So the
Mhm.
next the future of testing would be accessibility testers as well, I would say. And most companies have brought about this change. In service based companies like HCL, Infosys, and Wipro, they have taken this very seriously, and they have accessibility consultants who are specifically being hired for this role. And in my company, I brought about this change. So either the company should take it seriously, or you can be the change maker for your company. So for in my case, I was the person who did this.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm pretty sure it wasn't easy, right? To
Yes,
actually
it wasn't
convince
easy.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, when do you perform this accessibility testing? I mean, which part of the test cycle is it? Like regression and so on? Like that was a bit.
For a regression requirement, we would typically not say accessibility, but I would say, right, and like I showed in the SDLC cycle, how it fits in.
Mhm.
Every stage requires accessibility. You can collaborate with your UX team or UI team and
Mhm.
discuss the accessibility requirements from their purview. Or
Mhm.
when you're sitting with the design team, you can think of it from their view. And when your developers develop solutions, you can ask them if they have added that as a part of their requirement. And so like I showed, firstly we would be doing the functional exploratory checks or automated checks, whatever we have to do for our story. And this accessibility comes into picture as a non-functional requirement, like you have performance or security or usability. So accessibility basically comes as a non-functional requirement. So when a user story comes up, you can discuss it with your PO or your scrum master or the dedicated person, and you can ask them to add accessibility as a NFR to your story. So you could be along with your normal checks that you do, exploratory and automated or API, you could be also doing these checks. So you would be holistically testing the product. And this will give a 360 degrees view. We are not narrowing down our opportunities or approach just to some areas like automation or API. We are also considering the non-functional aspects like performance or security and accessibility. So you, when you are giving a demo to your customer, it would give a great image.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Understood now.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mahadi. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time
Ram.
and time. For that, I noticed that one person asked, like, can you please share the resources link here? I think it's already in the slide. I'll be sharing those links in our meetup page, so you actually can just take it from there.
Sure.
All right. Okay, if that's all, if there's no any questions, let me move on to the next session.
Thank you, Ram and MoT, for this opportunity.
Most welcome. The pleasure and the honor was ours. Thank you so much, Mahadi. Okay. Uh, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So, guys, I think that we have came to the last part of our session. So, the next meetup would be on next month, 12th October 2021. It will still be online. So, speakers, volunteers, and sponsors are most welcome. So, till then, stay safe. Thank you so much. See you guys in the next session. Bye bye.